Awesome to welcome Colgate University head coach Ganiyat Adeduntan to the basketball podcast. In her second season, Coach Adeduntan orchestrated one of the greatest single season improvements in program history. Colgate increased its win total by 10 games in 2022-23, finishing 16-4 overall and 10-8 in the Patriot League play to secure the number 4 seed in the Patriot League tournament. One of the greatest factors contributing to last season's success was the team's defense, which ranked 9th nationally in three-point field goal percentage defense and 12th in scoring defense, good enough to lead the Patriot League in both categories. Adeduntan arrived at Colgate after 3 seasons as the top assistant coach and 4 seasons overall on the staff of Jennifer Rizzotti at George Washington. Adeduntan has also served at coaching stints at Northeastern University, Wheelock College, and Florida State University School. Coach G, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Chris.
So excited to talk to you. Well, let's first start with this. Colgate, not the easiest job, but in a short time, you've got it going in the right direction. So maybe start talking about a little bit of the process of going to Colgate and then getting it going in the right direction.
Yeah. I was really excited when I took this job because I saw it as a place with a lot of potential, specifically with what other sports teams were already doing. So you think about men's basketball, women's volleyball, women's ice hockey, women specifically. So for me, it showed that you could recruit good athletes here and you can find success. So that was intriguing, aside from just it being high academic in a league that I had paid a lot of attention to over the years. I felt like there was a diamond in the rough here, just with some recruiting and a different change to how things are culturally. I really felt like this could be a competitive place where we can lay our mark.
Well, and you've laid your mark, and we're going to get into a lot of those things that have helped you along the way. But let's start with this first, because by training, you're a nurse, and that's got to be unique. Are you the only head coach who was previously a nurse?
I don't know the answer to that.
Nor do we.
My guess is that there aren't many. But yeah, I really look at my mentality and just my philosophy stems a lot is driven from just how I was trained as a nurse. We focus a lot on holistic development. Think about Florence Nightingale and just the way our books were written and what our focus was. Care was a big part of how we were trained to really care about our patients, be an advocate for them, thinking about them as a whole person and not just, hey, this is the illness, this is the ailment they have. If you really think about everything that's connected to them from their culture, their body, their mind, their spirit, all of a sudden you're able to find a way to target their care in a different way. And I think about it the way our players are. Every single player on my team is different and unique. Of course, some similarities, but each one of them came from a different background. Each one of them has a different culture. Each one of them, their spirit is different. Their mind, their body is different. So how can I meet them where they are and really try to coach them individually, still coaching them together, but coach them individually, because if I think about them as an individual, then I can hopefully get them the best out of them. But a lot of it is driven from that mentality. The other piece is I always try to remind myself is it's not life or death. As much as I am a competitor, being a high achiever has just always been something that was ingrained in me from an early age. But just knowing that it is a game. And remembering that on a daily basis. It's supposed to be fun. I worked in a profession where it was not a game. You had to be on it all the time. It wasn't, I think the care I'm providing right now is more preventative and proactive. The care I would give at times as a nurse was not. Some of it was emergency situations, but remembering in those really tough situations, hey, telling myself, relax, you're good. There's a lot of good that you can always find in a day, but I do feel like a lot of it transfers over and the way I lead, the way I show up every single day.
Great stuff. The holistic development, the genuine care. I'm curious because as coaches, we talk about building relationships and the importance of the relationships with your players, administration, fans, etc. Is that something that's taught in the nursing profession? Is that something that's encouraged, or does that not necessarily translate the same way?
Yeah, it is. Communication is big. So making sure you're asking the right questions to elicit the kind of answers and response you want. I think back on just doing a a physical, we start with a history of the patient. So this is getting as much information as we can before they even tell us what may be happening. We can potentially pull out a lot of information before they, tell us why they may be there. So in those moments, in that conversation is where you're building that relationship with them. And when you can show them that you care about them, not just for why they're there, but everything that matters to who they are as a whole full person, then they end up sharing a little bit more. So that is a big part of it. And for sure, another thing that transfers over to how I coach and how I build relationships with players is try to get to, I always say you got to peel the orange sometimes. You're not going to get everything you want at first. But I will sit and I'll ask questions in different ways to get the information I need.
And imagine in both professions, being deliberate and direct has value as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I do consider myself a pretty direct person. I don't talk around things. So I'm pretty clear, concise with things that I'm saying. And when I know I need some form of information, it's going to be pretty clear.
Well, I love that. I've got to know you a little bit, and I love that part of your personality as well. And we can get right to the point and get right to the problem solving or solution based type thinking. And the other thing that you connected there is not life or death. And I know that's a big part of your philosophy as well, which is celebrate everything. So maybe we should go into that now.
Yeah, when you're building something, you're not going to get that ultimate prize, right? But the joy is in the journey. So always trying to remember that. And letting our players know that there is growth. It may not be this like huge, substantial growth where you're winning a championship or you're winning 20, 30 games or whatever it is. But every single day, if you're showing up and you're growing just a little bit, you're ultimately going to reach the success at some point. But to keep yourself optimistic and positive, one of the things that we do is let's clap for it, something I'll say. So whether that be an on-court type success, whether that be an on-court success, something that we've said we're going to be focused on this week. And if we're doing it, like we got to celebrate it. So finding opportunities to just pause and enjoy it. And I love the saying, celebrate everything, get back to work. So we're not celebrating to be content. We're celebrating to be like, hey, we're really happy with where we are, but we're going to keep pushing ourselves and be hungry to continue to get better.
Well, and that is the challenge of it, right? A lot of coaches don't want to celebrate things that they consider not the end goal or the final prize, but let's clap for it. Is that simple, right? It's just like, we're just going to acknowledge it and move on.
Yeah. And it's turned to a thing now. Our players, when something happens, they'll say, hey, can we clap for that? And I'm like, absolutely. Let's clap for it. Let's just pause and be still for a moment and just be excited about what we just accomplished. And that's where you find the excitement and the joy. And if you can keep finding like small wins, it keeps everyone motivated and inspired. And that's something that we have with our players right now is like, they're trying to find ways like to be excited and to be joyful for each other. And that's what we're doing as a coaching staff and the way that we're leading them.
Well, that's great. I mean, they're the ones that are taking charge of that slogan now as well.
Yeah, for sure.
For me, that was one of the hardest things early in my career, though, was because I think in sport, especially, but I think in basketball, like coaches are always supposed to be intense. They're supposed to be hard. They're supposed to be all these different things. And to take those moments to celebrate small things. I mean, it really is hard. And it's got to be very deliberate on your part in terms of that. Did you write that on your practice plan, the different things that you thought you could celebrate that day? Or?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We're really consistent with how we approach post game. So if we play a game on this day, we come in the next day the same exact way. So it's what went well, what didn't go well. What are some things that we can do a little bit better or differently as we move forward? And in those moments, in the what went well, we're celebrating. Hey, we had talked about we want to keep a team, so whatever number or percentage, we're going to celebrate it. We're going to celebrate some standouts in the game. If it's someone that we've noticed made some huge improvement with rebounding, we're going to clap for them. And then a lot of, I think about our culture and things that are important to us. A lot of it also stems with off the court when I'm talking about celebrating successes. Like I want to know what things are going well in their lives and how special is it for you to share something and have a whole team around you who's celebrating you in that moment. Like we had a kid who talked about an internship that she just received or a grade that she had been, or grade in an exam that she had been studying for all week. Like we want to know those things and we want to feel the love from each other. But it is intentional. It's very intentional about letting them know like, hey, I'm on you guys and really pushing you to continue to grow and improve. And when you do it, I'm going to celebrate it. I'm going to make sure that you know that I see it, but I'm going to keep pushing to keep working at it and continue to work to get better.
That's super stuff. And then another part that connects to all this about, building your players, building your program is this player development philosophy of yours. And can you talk a little bit about these development meetings? I think you do them 4 times a year, right?
Yes, we do. One of the things that I love about coaching as an assistant, I loved the player development piece was just my favorite part. With coaching, just being able to see a player go from one place to another is just really exciting. So I'm very, very involved with development, not just with conversations, but on the court with development too. So I feel like with development, I want my players to be collaborative with us as a coaching staff. So it's not just like we have these goals for you. In one of our very first early meetings of the year, it's like, what goals do you have for yourself? Like, where do you want to go? Where do you want this season to be for you? But it can't just be, I want to be a better 3-point shooter. Okay. Like, let's make sure it's measurable. And let's make sure we have an action plan. So sometimes we sit in some of the meetings will go a little bit longer because it's like, we need some actionable steps so that we can refer back to it when we have our next development meeting. Now we can say, okay, what things went well, what things do we need to adjust? And we're actually doing those things on the court with them. So we're really, really, it's really clear, what the improvements are. Those are the type of workouts we're going to be doing with them. And those are the things that we're going to be telling them to be doing on their own. If it's getting more shots up, as they're working on certain moves, like those are things that come up in that plan. So it happens 4 times a year. We evaluate it. Sometimes we add more goals as the year is going. And we refer back to it. So our coaching staff knows like, hey, these are the goals that they set for themselves. These are things that we want them to continue to work on. And my goal is like, you're not going to be the same player that you were when you first got here. We'd be doing you a disservice if that was the case. So we want you to continue to add to your tool belt and just keep, improving, because if you can get better as an individual, then all of a sudden our entire team is getting better.
So can you give us a perspective? So there's 4 different meetings. I assume they're at 4 different times of the year. Can you give us just a brief overview of what those different periods of the year would be? And then what kind of general things would be covered in those 4 different periods?
Yeah. So the very first one usually is early on, end of the summer, typically. So we usually have them for summer session. So before they come in the meeting, they receive an email from me and it's, hey, I want you to write out 2 to 3 goals of yours. Oh, first, sorry, let me go backwards a little bit. I want them to write out what their strengths and weaknesses are. All right. So there are times when I'll have conversations with players and they're so shy with what they're good at. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Like, you're good at that. You got to write in like, are you sure? Yes. So trying to build their confidence too, because this is something that they can use in their life thereafter playing basketball. So really being confident in what you're good at, and then also being aware of what things that may not be a strength of yours right now. So they write that, and then they write about 2 to 3 goals and then action steps. So their goals, usually with our newcomers, we have to help them formulate, okay, this is a measurable type goal with a percentage or a number, a days, whatever it is that we can refer back to. Okay, if you're going to shoot this number of shots, this is the ultimate goal that we want. So that's what happens in that meeting. Then we have a follow-up meeting. Usually right before our first games would start. In that meeting, we're reflecting back on the last couple of like six weeks to 2 months of what went well, what didn't go well, what did you do, why did it not go well, do we want to make some adjustments? And in that meeting, they already were sent an email to create performance goals. So now we're going into the season. Like, what do you want these goals to be? Before it was more like, this is just the skill work, the development piece overall of you improving as a player. Now, what do we want our performance goals to be? So then we meet again midway through the season to double check and just make sure, like, okay, are you on the right track? Are you doing the things that you need to be doing? And then we meet at the end of the year to discuss postseason, like what things do you want to get better at now? And then it just starts over again at the end of the summer.
So, I mean, it seems clear, obviously, for your players that their goals meet your expectations, and then they have a chance to obviously follow through with those. What about for a player whose goals do not necessarily meet your expectations or the role they're going to have on the team? How do you help balance that for the player?
That it goes back to me being direct, because I want our players to, one, leave that meeting feeling confidence, but I also don't want them leaving and feeling like, what unrealistic more so. So it's happened. It's happened a few times. But it's me just talking through it all. Okay. Like, where are we right now? Really like having them I guess, start more with curiosity and asking open-ended questions. And usually when those questions are asked, they tend to get to it instead of me getting to it. Because again, I want it to be really big collaboration. I don't want to tell them like, I only want you doing this or you can't do that. It's, hey, let's think through this. Let's look back at what you've done previously. Let's look back. We'll talk about some practice stats too in some of these conversations. Let's see where you are. And then when that data, the information is being provided, they tend to get there on their own without me being so blunt with, hey, this is unrealistic.
And sometimes you need to be blunt, as you talked about, being direct in terms of those things. And then these player development meetings, obviously, they drive your player development plan for players. So talk about, you mentioned it briefly, but talk about how you connect it for the player, that what they're doing in these player development sessions or team practices are helping them along their plan. Because I imagine that's a big part of what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely. And our coaches refer back to it. So when we're doing preseason workouts and a coach might have 2 or 3 kids, sometimes one-on-one, if it's a footwork issue that they need to get better at, like a lot of the time and focus is spent on that. We also meet as a staff and go through every single kid, especially in the preseason. We'll meet again at different points during the year. Like maybe a kid needs to add this, or maybe a kid needs to work on this and improve on this. So the collaboration, the communication continues with our coaching staff. So it's not just me that knows it, their position coach knows it, and everyone on staff knows what this kid needs to continue to get better at. So it is ongoing, but a lot of the skill work takes place in the preseason, postseason. But one thing we're also really intentional about is in-season development. So our coaches have a few players that they work with specifically. So that's why it's something that continues over time, because you're not going to see improvement in a day or two. It's small increments over a long period of time.
And this is not just player development in terms of basketball. You're also focusing on their ability to be able to build relationships, their ability to be able to be better leaders, career development, all these different things as well. So maybe just connect that for us.
Yeah. Our philosophy and my philosophy starts with a person first. So again, it goes back to that holistic development, and where I pull that from just the nursing background and just how I was coached too. I have some really, really great mentors and people I really pull a lot of my philosophy from, and just how I approach coaching. So as much as we're going to develop them as players on the court, we want to develop them overall as people so that they can ultimately reach or strive to reach and become their best versions. So with relationships, it's important to me. So it's intentional. We do what's called connection groups with our kids, where each assistant coach has a couple of players that they meet with pretty frequently. I'm meeting with players consistently, but I have conversations with my players too. Like, this relationships is two-sided. It can't just be one way. Like, automatically we're going to be reaching out to you and want to talk to you and build relationships with you and be very, very intentional. But the best relationships are the ones where it's 50-50, right? So there has to be that collaboration. There has to be that grace that's also given to me, because there's only one of me. And I'm also human, one of me and 14, 15, sometimes 16 players. But they know that anytime they reach out, they want to talk outside of anything, I'm dropping everything. Hey, let's meet at this time, because that conversation is the most important to me. We do a lot when it comes to leadership and career development as well. Because I feel like everyone has the opportunity to be a leader, regardless of what class that you're in. But it's just going to look a little bit different for each kid, depending on where they are in their college career. But really trying to build them up ultimately as people. We always try to transfer a lot of things that we talk about, whether we're reading a book in the beginning of the year. Yes, it might be targeted and focused on basketball. I'm always saying to them, hey, this is a life lesson and a life skill right here. How to push through adversity, how to be resilient and grow toughness. We've done sessions on like power poses, the confidence that you have to exude. Turns into like career development stuff like LinkedIn, resume writing, financial literacy. We do a lot of things with our players. And ultimately, like, I want to coach basketball. I want to be on the court all day, but I find a lot of joy just in being able to develop them off the court. I think and feel like a big part of what I get to do is teach and educate. And that's the joy and the excitement mostly in being a head coach.
We talked briefly just before the podcast, the chicken or the egg. When you talk about building a program, you talk about building the defense, building the offense. Obviously the ideal situation is both at the same time, which you're trying to do, but inevitably what became the cornerstone for your success early on has been the defense and the rebounding. And we said the numbers already in the introduction, but ninth nationally in 3-point field goal percentage, and then 12th in scoring defense, which both led the Patriot League. So maybe first, just give us an oversight of the defensive philosophy that has led to that success.
Yeah, the philosophy would start more so with what we call our absolutes. And we have core values, and then we also have just like program specific absolutes. So they're non-negotiables. So you have to communicate, you have to compete, you have to have energy and enthusiasm. So it's communication, competitiveness, energy, and enthusiasm. And that transfers over a lot to the basketball side of things, but it also transfers to just how they live their lives too. You got to be a great communicator in everything you're doing. So whenever they get jobs in the future, like if you can't talk to people, it's going to be really, really hard for you to make it. Being a high achiever, every time you show up on the basketball court, there's no point in doing it if you're not going to give your best, if you're not going to be striving to win. So we're always talking about that. And then energy and enthusiasm. There's no point in doing this thing called play basketball in college if you're not having joy, passion, and excitement for wanting to grow and get better. So that's the thing that we talk about consistently. And in the second year, there was a lot more like buy-in because it was just something we emphasized. Not that we didn't emphasize in the first year, we just emphasized it even more. Like, you're not going to get to play basketball if you don't show up every single day, willing to grow with your communication skills. If you're not going to compete, you're not going to have energy and enthusiasm. So that transfers over to the defensive end. We were really adamant about making sure there's not much we can control, right, in this game. But I think as a coach, we can control a little bit of how hard that you play. If you don't work hard, it's going to make it really, really hard for you to play here at Colgate. And defense is important to me. You don't have to be the most talented player to be tough and resilient, because that's all it is. You have to be tough, you have to be resilient, and you have to be determined. So on the defensive end of thing, we established that as our identity. Like, when we show up every single day, we're going to be consistent on this side of the floor. And our goal is to make it really, really hard for our opponent. We're also really, really scout specific. Like, we have our base principles, but we also watch film and we scout. And then our base principles may tweak a little bit because of the scout. But the defensive piece is one that I've always been passionate about as a player. And then when I became a coach, I mean, you got to score to win, but if you can't defend and stop somebody, it's going to make it really hard to win as well.
Well, and especially as you're building a new program back up, right, in that way. So talk to us a little bit, and we're going to come back to defense and dive deeper, but talk to us about that challenge, because obviously you want to be good on both ends of the ball, and you will be eventually, but there's definitely been some struggles on offense that I know you've been constantly trying to figure out.
Oh yeah, we're always trying to figure out how can we create more opportunities for ourselves. How can we put the ball in the basket? I'm always saying that to our staff. How can we figure out more ways to put the ball in the basket? And we do feel like our defense helps with that. So being able to play in transition a little bit more, changing up our defenses has helped a little bit. But it's constant work, and being able to adjust to the players that we have. Understanding when you take over a program, you can't just play the style of basketball that you ultimately want to play. Like, you have to be able to play what's going to work best for them. And as you add and, recruit and build, maybe you can start doing some things. But one of the things I think we've done really well is just making adjustments and utilizing what we have to the best of our abilities. But it's a work in progress, but it's getting better every single day, and the confidence is growing, but it won't grow if you don't put the work in. We do have a full roster right now who's committed to just growing and getting better.
It's exciting. And you mentioned the identity, obviously defend, rebound, and champion plays. So let's dive a little bit deeper into some of those things. I know, maybe first talk about what's Camp D Up, Coach?
Camp D Up is something I started years ago when I was coaching in Northeastern, and it's not mine. It's been taken and recreated. Let's just say that Sherry Cole did it when she was at Oklahoma, heard about it and had a conversation with her, and then just pulled it and kind of made it our own thing. But I love the concept, again, because I feel like I have this passion and desire from being really, really great at it. So the first few days of practice is all defense. I'm talking about from closeouts to just all our principles, to how we're in the gaps, to how we guard ball screens, to transition defense, to shell drill. Everything is focused on what our defense is going to be about that year. And what I found with Camp D Up is there's a level of excitement. I was thinking about not doing it this year, which is interesting. One of my players brought it up, and she was like, I'm so excited about Camp D Up. And I'm like, oh, I was actually thinking about maybe not doing it this year. And after that, and having more conversation with our staff, like, it's it's what we do. So we're going to keep doing it. Because
why were you thinking about not doing it?
Our summer looked a little bit different. It
Yeah.
looked a little bit different with us going on a foreign tour, and we had put a lot of things in defensively over that 7-8 weeks. So I just thought maybe we can just kind of keep adding and building. But after some conversations and seeing that our kids are actually like thinking about it, makes me excited because they know that that's what we're about. It wasn't going to change. Our identity was not going to change. Just the concept and the way in which we're going to go about it this year may have, but it's not. We're gonna do it again, and we make it fun. We chart. We have a board where we're competing. We're keeping track of deflections and steals and charges, those type of things. And we have a camp winner of the day, and then we have a camp D-up of the, usually it's 3 days. We'll have someone who wins over the 3 days. We watch film as well, so we'll start this first day watching film of why defense is our identity and what it looks like when we're all together, 5 people on the court playing hard-nosed defense, what those champion board plays look like when we're getting deflections and steals and we're rotating and we're scrambling and we're finishing the play with a defensive rebound, or box outs leads to a defensive rebound. So I love it because I get excited about the defensive end. I just feel like so much can happen when you can be really, really focused and determined on that side. And our goal is that we're going to keep, building and improving the offensive end, and transition has to be a big part of that. And no better way than to get a defensive rebound or a steal and then push in transition.
Well, you love it. Keep doing it, Coach. It's great. And it's great that your players identify with it now as well. And another thing, you don't necessarily hear this as much on defense, but I totally agree with it. This concept of being unpredictable. And I think coaches are doing this more and more, to not have this one defense that solves all and this one system that solves all. So talk to us about being unpredictable on defense.
Yeah, I've definitely grown into this, but I think back on the first year here, what ways can we just like make people not be able to do what they want to do the entire game? So what things can we throw out there, whether it be we may start in a press, but we show a different press another time. We may play man in this possession and we go zone another possession. We might come out of a timeout in one defense and we switch it over. So it's how can we create more possessions for ourselves? How can we not allow teams to be comfortable? So maybe the coach knows, but the players may all of a sudden they think we're going to be in man. We're doing something different. So mixing up defenses, same way with ball screens. We don't guard ball screens the same way. And that was something that's developed over the years too for me, where I actually love mixing up defenses, ball screen defenses, and again, not being predictable. So we may do this now, tomorrow we may do something different. So we work on a lot of different ball screen coverages, and that's why it becomes really scout specific. It's like, what things can we do against this team that maybe we can't do against the next team because they have this, and vice versa.
So you talked about obviously being unpredictable. You talked about some of your absolutes. So thinking about both those things, is there something tactically that is an absolute for Colgate women's basketball every single game?
Defensively?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way we close out is an absolute. So it's one hand, high hand, the sticked hand, just our base, we're squared, we're chest to chest. So that's an absolute for us in the way that we close out.
And then, but the tactic changes for closeouts, like in terms of where you force and who you're.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that goes more to the scout. And does this kid want to go right? Do they want to go left? Or they're a 3-point shooter? We might close out a little bit more aggressively. So the foundation and the principle in which we close out is usually the same. Our communication never changes. So we're really adamant about talking early, loud, and often. We're really, really adamant about competing on a defensive end. Always talking about multiple efforts. So it can't just be one. Got to get that second one in there. Scrambling is a big part of what we do, and just how, like, you might be good for the first 5, 6, 7 seconds. You navigate a screen, and all of a sudden you got to figure out how to scramble and still finish the possession. So we put them in different situations to try to find success there.
And then how within practice are you getting them to understand the variations in terms of the closeout decision?
Yeah, we break it down. So we'll play some specific drills. One of the things that we'll do in Camp D Up is learn each other. Like, we'll do a scouting report on the team so that we're already doing that before we get to scouts. Like, we have players on our team that some of them prefer to go left and they're righties. Some of them are left-handed and prefer, they have certain tendencies. And some of them are really good at 3-point shooting. So it's okay. Now, the scout on your teammate let's guard them in a certain way. So we'll do drills where it's your teammate is not allowed to go right. Okay, if they go right, then we're going to start this over. There's going to be some consequences for it. So we're building that up in some like disadvantaged type situations.
Yeah, it's great stuff. I love that self-scout and understanding not just yourself, but your teammates as well. And that should translate to helping them on offense understand how to take advantage of each other's strengths as well, shouldn't it?
Absolutely. And I always say to them, I might be watching offense right now because that's what we're working on, but the defense is important and vice versa. If we're working on defense, you should always be thinking about offense and not turning it over, making good decisions. So we're always working both sides of the floor all the time.
Love it. You referenced obviously defensive rebounding. You referenced how your defense can help you steal some potential possessions. So talk to us about some of the things that you stat on defense, some of the analytics that you really value that help support your defensive philosophy.
Yeah, so we'll stat deflections. That's big for us. And we're building. Last year we ended up pressing a lot. So when we're talking about traps, our goal is to let's see if we can get a deflection, because a deflection helps, that rotation be able to get a steal ultimately. So we'll stat that. We'll stat steals. We love charges. I just think is a great momentum builder and shift. So we'll chart that. Rebounding is something that we chart as well. We chart where box out percentages. So, and we'll do this on the offensive end too. The offensive end is more so box out effort. So we're not worried about how many offensive rebounds you're getting on the offensive end. We're just worried about how hard you're actually crashing the boards. But on the defensive end specifically, are you making contact? Are you checking if you can't make contact because your guy's not crashing the boards? But we stat that during practices, and we've seen an uptick just in that. And I have a group of really smart, my players are brilliant, and that's the fun part too, is we're able to do a lot of different things because they're able to handle a lot of different things, which makes it really fun and exciting. But one of the things that we learned is when we give them information, stats to them, it's like all of a sudden they're like, oh, they see it. And now it helps them, challenge themselves and have something to look to and look forward to. So they see it after every practice, what their box out percentage is, what their crash percentage is. And we've seen just a different level of determination to be really, really good at that end. And we talk a lot and emphasize through film too. So a lot of it is not just in the physical play. We're showing them what good defense is when we have great rotations, and we're showing them ways to continue to improve. But, for us, we're never going to be perfect in any possession, offensively or defensively. But speaking specifically defensively, I don't care if you miss a rotation. I don't care if your closeout isn't how it's supposed to be. As long as you keep playing hard and you just try your very best and you hustle, great things happen, because it always will. And the hardest part is that scramble piece. But if you can find a way to keep hustling, good things are going to happen more often than not.
Is what you define as a box out, are they different on the perimeter versus the interior in terms of how you stat it and you provide obviously a value for them?
Yeah. So there are some guards that won't crash, especially like a point guard. They might be thinking about heading back. But when we chart it, if your guy's not crashing, there has to be some like visual of a check. And also a point too. So when we're charting it, as if you didn't check or point, that means you weren't thinking about boxing out, and it has to be something that's on your mind. The others, though, if you're not making contact, then you're not going to get that possession.
Is it butt contact or tee up contact? What are you emphasizing?
Yeah, it's butt contact. We're bumping and holding, depending on where they are on the perimeter. And then for me, it's about pursuing the ball, because there are going to be times where a lot has to happen at once. So if someone's crashing, can you just take them off their path? But maybe you're not able to hold them, so you're just tagging and bumping a little bit, and you're grabbing them to go. So you have to be able to figure out as it's happening, but it has to be quick. And sometimes maybe they're not crashing. You can just pursue the rebound, but we need to be able to see that on film, and you don't get credit for it if you don't actively show it. And we tell them, we go through it in the beginning of the year. We go through at different points in the year when we're showing, hey, these are great box out possessions. This is what it looks like. This is a situation where you could have done this. So they know. And at this point, they're aware what a good possession is.
Well, I love that point that you made about, regardless of what's happening with your offensive player, you want to make your box out visible, and it's a conscious thing. That whether you're pointing or you're physically making contact, we know that you thought about it. That's a brilliant concept, Coach. With that, we talk a little bit about crash effort. offensive rebounding. So maybe give us an oversight. What are you doing in terms of offensive rebounding? And then how do you define that crash effort in terms of the analytics?
Yeah, we always have one player that gets back. And we have 4 players that crash the offensive boards. Typically, you'll have one player kind of roam, above the free throw line area, but there has to be some form of pursuit. So we're looking at, in this possession, did you make an effort to crash the boards? Again, we don't care about if you got the rebound. We care about, did you allow yourself to be boxed out? We teach them different ways to, whether it's spinning, swimming, juking your defender. Like, you can't allow yourself to be boxed out, whatever it takes. And again, that has been something that has grown into, our kids are really bought into being really great on that side of the floor. And there are times where they need reminders. So some kids, their percentages may be 50%. And I tell them it's not okay. So our identity is defend, rebound, and make champion plays. So if we're not rebounding on both ends of the floor, we're not putting ourselves in a position to find success. So those are things that we can control. We may not be able to control that ball going in the basket, but we sure enough can control how hard that we play.
Love it. And I know we're aligned on this, the value of disadvantage, advantage drills. And so give us a perspective on that, how that helps you shape your defense and obviously your offense as well.
Yeah. The disadvantage drills is something we've done a lot more over the last year and a half, just trying to help them become better decision makers offensively, and then also trying to help them finish plays defensively. Because we're usually really good at, let's get through the screen. And then all of a sudden when things break down, what are we doing? So we'll start it up where sometimes if the offense has a ball, they may be on their hip, they may be on their behind them, they may be in front of them, or we'll recreate a situation that may have happened in the game. Maybe whether it's like a ball screen situation, and all of a sudden the ball goes, or the ball handler has the ball, and then now they have to scramble to finish the play. We'll do some rebounding drills where it's out of a disadvantage as well. So they're having to scramble to find someone to box and then still pursue the rebound. But we found these drills are transferable on both sides. So when we're working on defense, whether it's a blind or a hip or a behind, 1-on-1 situation, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, we'll build it up sometimes to 5-on-5. We found that it is really good for us to scramble and still figure out how to get a stop, even if you're beat. And then also trying to find ways to make plays out of an advantage that you may have created.
So we can talk about this. I'm not sure your perspective on it. I love advantage, disadvantage drills. One of the challenges is sometimes your offense gets a false sense of the advantage. And one of the hardest things, as we know in basketball, is to create an advantage from neutral. So talk to us about how you balance that.
Yes. And we're not only doing it. So there are times let's say we're about to play against a team that plays a lot of middle ball screens. And I know if we're going to, let's say, guard a ball screen in a certain way, this is what they're looking for. So we're going to put ourselves in this situation to figure out how to make a play. So whether that's a rotation that has to drop and come from the weak side, whether that's the post player having to be ready to communicate and switch, we'll drill that specifically. This is what we need to be ready for because this is what they're looking for. So sometimes that's really scout specific. So it's not really our offense, but at the same time, when our players are coming off of things, okay, we got to work on creating advantages for ourselves. So that 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4 type situations, we spend a lot of time doing that too.
I love it. It's a lot of fun. And competitively, you talk about, again, you're trying to develop defense, you're trying to develop offense. Talk about how you balance that with competition.
Competition is big, and that's one of our absolutes. So as much as we want them to drive themselves and just be a competitor in everything we do, we also have to create situations for them. So I would say almost everything is competitive, whether we're doing a shooting drill individually against themselves, against teams, whether we're doing, we're playing, everything is scored, it's time, there's goals. So that's something that we do. In every practice, there's going to be some form of competition because I want them thinking about winning and being at their best every single day. Sometimes I will be in a situation where maybe it's, we're playing 5 minutes, little half court segment. I might say next basket wins. So all of a sudden you're like, wait, we were up. And all of a sudden she's telling me next basket wins. Yeah. So now your drive is a little bit different. Now who's going to get a stop? Who's going to be able to put that ball in the basket? So just trying to find different ways. It's partly fabrication, right? But what we end up finding is they draw and their level of competition, goes up a notch.
Talk to us a little bit more about obviously being scout specific, as you mentioned, and then how you build that within the say the 2-3 days prior to an opponent. Because once you get into your schedule, obviously you're doing multiple games and obviously only a few practices to be able to get ready to be able to adjust your defense. So talk to us about how you do that.
Yeah, and that's why Camp D Up has been really good because we're able to get a lot in at once. So when we have to do it again later on for a scout, it's not the first time our closeout has changed. Instead of being squared, maybe we're fully influencing someone to go left, and that takes away from a principle of no middle drives, which I didn't bring up earlier. But our goal is that we're going to be beat. They're going to go baseline because that's where our best help comes from. So we find opportunities. I always feel like the preseason, the postseason, preseason, summer, preseason, those are the months where you're trying to rebuild or build, how you're going to play and what you're going to look like during the season. So that when we get in the season is 2-3 days, we spend a lot of time in October, maybe going over some actions that we may have seen an opponent ran a year ago, and they may not do it again, but if they're going to do a cross screen, down screen, we're going to know how to guard it. So we try to expose them as much as we can so that when we get into those situations, hey, all of a sudden this team wants to run 5-out offense. This team wants ball screen motion. We've already seen it and guarded it. So in those 2 days is more so of a refresher.
So a refresher, and then obviously using video as well. So talk to us about how you connect the video for your players in terms of the scout specific adaptations.
Yeah, film is really big for us. So a lot of film, even before game starts, we're watching film on ourselves. So if it's a day that we're really, really focused on, hey, we're going to guard this way, we're going to reflect and watch it back. So show some good, show what we call teaching film. So not bad, we're just teaching. But then when it comes to scouts, it's personnel. A lot of it is heavy personnel driven. And then a lot of it also is this is what they really trying to figure out what an opponent wants to do and how they're trying to score. In what ways we're not going to be able to stop everything, but what is a couple of things that we can try to do to slow them down from what they're usually comfortable doing. So we'll come up with that game plan as a coaching staff, and we're very clear. And again, a group of players who are really, really bought in. I mean, they're asking questions, they're watching, they're pointing, and they're like, "Oh, do you want to do this?" Da, 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 da. So it's gotten to a point where now, like, there's a lot of collaboration. There's even been times last year that I'll ask them, "How do you feel about this?" Because there's that trust that's been built. Like, how do you feel about doing this? And then maybe we'll switch to that, and then they'll share it because I want them to feel like, hey, how are we going to defend whatever scheme we're going to use? It has to be them that is really bought into doing it. And when they are the ones that are making some of those decisions, all of a sudden the level of interest just goes up and the passion and the competitiveness even gets higher.
Fun. And I know one of the things that is common, not just to you, but to many coaches, obviously you hire good people and good people leave sometimes. And I know you've had some staff challenges where you've had to replace people at some different times of the season. Can you just give us some insights in terms of that process, in terms of how you go about trying to find someone that fits you and fits your program and your players?
Yeah, I would say number one is the value piece is important to me. So if I'm someone philosophy wise, I'm someone that is really big on relationships and the person first. I'm at a high academic institution, so you already know academics is going to come always before basketball. And then that development piece with basketball is also important as well. But really trying to find people who are like-minded in my values and the things that are important to them. That's first and foremost. Finding people who are just as or even more competitive than me. I think that's hard to find, but competitors, people that strive for excellence, people that work at it, work really, really hard. Those things are important. And then loyalty also is important, making sure that, what I'm saying, they're communicating the same way. And there's that level of trust. So ultimately, like, you don't have to be the most experienced, but if you can be someone that's going to work as hard as you can, you have a desire to continue to grow. That's important to me. And you're doing it for the right reasons. And we don't have a job if we don't have players, right? So like, we need the athletes, we need to support them, we need to be servant leaders to them. So they all have to have that same mentality. And I feel really lucky with the group that I have with me right now. We're all connected on the same page and all striving for the same goal.
There's many coaches at many levels that are at high academic schools, and there's certain challenges that come with that. It's not all just, we get smart players and it's easy. One of the challenges, as we know, is classes are much harder to be able to adapt to your practice times and different things that come with that. Can you talk about those challenges? Because I don't think people are aware of that, that it's not just as simple, let's practice 9 to 11 every day and everyone's there on time, is it?
Yeah, not at all. And every school is different. Every
Yep.
school is unique. So every school that I've been at, high academic, has been very different in its own ways. And Colgate, as special as it is, has some very unique differences. So from out of class assignments, that is mandatory and we have to work around. But when I recruit kids here, I tell them I'm going to support you. Academics will come first, and that stands. And it doesn't change, nor does it waver. But it can be very challenging because you need your whole team. Sometimes kids have to leave early. Sometimes they have to make up a lift, but we do work around it. And as challenging as it is, there's always a way. We can't practice from 9 to 11. We typically, like when we get into season practices, is after 4 o'clock. So all the academics usually done. There's a couple of days during the week, especially in the preseason, we may do something during the day around people's class schedules. But when we get into the heart of practicing for the season, is after 4. So it ends up being a longer day, and there is no working around that. That's just what it is. And once you get used to it, then it is what it is. And you just work around it.
Well, coaches listening may not be aware of that, but that's pretty rare for Division Ones nowadays. Most of them practice in the morning, and one of the big reasons they practice in the morning is so obviously players have nights free, but more importantly, that you have nights free to be able to recruit and do a lot of those other things that are such an important part of your job. So maybe talk about that's an extra challenge to this Alaire.
It is. It is definitely an extra challenge. Our location is an extra challenge too. So there might be times where like an assistant is out. Maybe they could have been gone for a day, and now they'll be out for 2 days because everything is 4 or 5 hours away. We're not able to recruit at night, but we're lucky to have some places close enough. And you know, Syracuse, and recruiting in the state of New York helps a little bit. But when we're practicing at 4:30, most days it's hard to get out to a game at night. So a lot of planning, trying to get out whenever we can. Maybe it's an off day, so trying to be strategic in that way. But for sure, it's being as creative as possible.
Coach, you were a Division III head coach before, and now Division I head coach. And maybe talk about Colgate in particular, how this experience has helped you, and then obviously your love for what you're doing.
Yeah, I always feel like you can't do anything without people. And we have some really special people here at Colgate, from the president, starting with the president and on down. The support I've had from the beginning from other coaches, people in the department, has been second to none. And then ultimately just the people that I am with on a daily basis with our staff. Like, it's a place that draws and attracts special people. So I've been really, really fortunate with that. And the players I'm able to recruit, I've been really fortunate with the type of people too. So for me, it's like, it's everything that I would have wanted, being able to come into a situation that I knew I had to build, right. And it wasn't going to be easy, but that I was going to have support through it. And I've had that from the beginning, and I still have it now.
Well, you still got it and you're still building it. And that's wonderful as well. And I got to give you credit, Coach. We have a relationship because you reached out to me. And that was wonderful. And I was grateful for that. And I'm grateful for all the relationship we've had. But maybe talk a little bit about that process of reaching out to me, and then some of the influence that Basketball Immersion has had.
Yeah, your name came up years ago. I was on a WBCA, like a mentorship group call. And there was a coach on the call that mentioned you. Ever since, I'm like, let me find out this guy. Let me look him up. So you're always someone that like, oh, I can, gain a lot from and learn from, and love some of the things that you were talking about, some of the concepts, some of the coaches that you were interviewing and having master classes with. So as we're in this process of the build, just trying to continue to, I'm not shy to ask questions.
You are not.
I love it. I will reach out to colleagues. I'll reach out to my mentors consistently, just trying to pull and grow. Because ultimately for me is like, if I ever get tired of growing, I need to just be done with this. So whatever information I can grab, I can pull to help myself continue to grow as a coach, to help my players continue to grow as players. I think it's only going to do us, put us in a good position to find success. So being able to work with you and collaborate with you and pick your brain has been great. Love our relationship, and I'm looking forward to more more questions, more thoughts and suggestions, and, you know, bouncing things off of you. Hey, we're trying this. What do you think? So I think it's been special, and I've really, really appreciated it.
Well, I've appreciated it as well, Coach. It's been wonderful. And I'm grateful to finally get you on the podcast and be able to share the game with everyone and share yourself with everyone too. And I think it's real special what you're doing. And we look forward to following you as you continue to build Colgate.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Chris. Thank you so much.